navigating online therapy with clients abroad not as easy as just jumping online and speaking to the person where they are, is it?
It's not. And hasn't the world of counselling and psychotherapy changed in the last 4 or 5 years? Until 2019, when we had the pandemic, most therapy was conducted face-to-face. Yes, there were quite pioneering therapists using online, video, telephone, but it wasn't a popular or standard offering. When the lockdown came, lots of therapists found themselves disconnected from clients and wanting to help them, then having to go online. And since then, online and telephone counselling has become part of the economy of counselling. One of the unintended consequences of working online means that the clients we work with may not be in the same country or even in the same town every time we meet them. We need to be very thoughtful of how we navigate working with clients who may be in a different country. If we're going to offer online and telephone counselling, ethically, we need to have a wider appreciation of what we can offer, what countries we can actually support clients in, and what countries may be a bit tricky.
Yeah, very well introduced, Rory. You're 100% right. We live in a very different world where the geographical anchors are looser than they used to be. I network with a number of people that call themselves digital nomads. They run businesses, have clients, and travel around the world. Why? Because they can. They don't have to be in an office anymore. I'll meet with them one week and they'll be in South America and in Mexico and Panama. And it's terribly exciting and interesting, but it does bring up the questions of working across borders when we're working as a therapist. The very first thing we need to consider is the legalities. We see the legalities of counselling that we might have been taught during our formal training. And during your formal training, you're taught the legalities of the country you reside in, but they definitely change from country to country and even from state to state within the United States. And it's easy to overlook and think that all countries hold the same legal requirements, but they do not, including licensing to practice as a talking therapist. It differs from country to country. So I think a good starting point, Rory, is to understand what the legalities of the different countries that we intend to practice in are.
I totally agree, Ken. This is a two-way street. We're talking about therapists based in the UK working with clients in a different country. But what happens if the therapist decides, having trained in the UK, to move to Spain or America and work with clients back in the UK? You have to abide by the laws of the country you're in. If I advertise myself, what are the laws of the country? It is new. People are trying to work out where we are with it. What are the laws of the country I'm residing in say about my ability to practice? It usually falls down to qualifications. In America, each state is differently legislated. So there's 50 states in America, and each state would have their own legislation and licensing requirements for psychotherapists. You can't even work state to state. I met an American psychotherapist who said they could only work in Florida. They couldn't work with somebody in Utah because their regulations are completely different. So you can get yourself into quite hot water. And I think the first thing to do is speak with your insurance company. If things go wrong, your insurance company will go to try and get some sort of support and maybe form some form of legal defense, and that costs money. You really do need to speak to your insurance company first and see what they will insure you for. And you may be surprised of what they will insure you for and against. Some insurance companies will insure you for working in different countries. Others won't. Get it in writing that they'll allow you to work into different countries. Because if something goes wrong, you're going to need money to pay for some form of defense or compensation.
It's interesting that you mention insurers. I recall when online therapy became a necessity at the time of COVID, and there was a massive spike in those that went online. I phoned my insurer, and my insurer wasn't really set up to understand it at the time. I said, can I work online? And they went, yeah, I can't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to work online. And as this has become more mainstream, they've become wiser. They've looked at what the requirements and regulations are. If you speak to your insurer now, you may very well have to fill in forms and stipulate in which countries you intend to practice. But not only that, there are also different requirements for different types of therapy. I'm going to speak just about the United States to show you how complex this can be and how important it is to do the CPD and the formal training. What we're speaking about now is family therapy, marriage and family therapy within the United States. And there is a specific requirement and a license that needs to be held. If you're in Alabama, you must hold an MFT license issued by Alabama to practice marriage and family therapy. And if I go to the Alaska Board of Marital and Family Therapy, anyone considering e-therapy or online therapy needs to know if you are living in Alaska and receiving e-therapy or online therapy from outside Alaska. There is no process available for the regulation of that therapist. They're basically saying you need to inquire and make sure you know what you're getting yourself into there. Therapy is regulated in certain places in the world. In other places, it's not. Now, we run a number of different courses where we require evidence that somebody has trained, is with an ethical body, and holds a certain level of competence to join our courses. Very often we get people from different countries where they don't have the same kind of requirements. Our board of tutors has to look to the laws in those countries to understand where those people are at. There are certain countries where you don't have to be a member of an ethical body to practice as a counselor or psychotherapist. So it changes dramatically. If you think about it, we are in service of our clients. If that client felt they received subpar service and weren't happy, who do they go to if they're in a different country? If they're in the country that you practice in, then you're going to have an ethical body and the client can go and register a complaint. What happens if that person is in a completely different country? These are things we need to consider and at the minimum put into our contract or agreement with the client. So once we've satisfied ourselves that we can work in a certain jurisdiction, the next thing is the contract and laying out what is on offer and what should happen in the event of an unlikely event. That includes getting the details of the client, where they are, the address they're at, maybe somebody we could contact if there was a challenge with them, if that person became unwell during the session. Who do we contact? If we're in our own country, would contact emergency services. Who would you contact if the person is in a country where you don't even know the number of the emergency services? So much to consider there, just in that, Rory.
Absolutely. If you're working with someone in France and something goes wrong, you could get the emergency number. But how do you communicate? If you can't speak fluent French, you're at the mercy, at the hope that the person who picks up can speak English. And that kind of leads me on to other practical things. What about referrals? Who do you refer them to if they're in another country? What would you do if you were working with a client and they became really unwell and needed psychiatric support? Becomes very tricky. And also, just on a very practical level, payment. I recently spoke to someone who was thinking of working with a UK client who was going to Russia, and it brought up a huge amount of issues because, as we speak, Russia is on a kind of barred list in the international community, and it means that it's very difficult to send payments, so I'm told. It's not just a case of thinking they'll be in another country for a few weeks, it'll be all right. This needs to be really planned to the finite detail because things can go wrong. We always hope for the best and plan for the worst. There's a lot to consider.
There is. Yeah. And I don't want our listener to take away that Ken and Rory are saying you shouldn't work outside of your geographical boundaries. What we are saying is it needs very careful consideration. It needs formal training to underpin your knowledge that these things even need looking at. And then whatever area you're working in, whatever country that is not yours, you need to consider it uniquely as a standalone country and do your research and understand what it looks like for working within that country. And of course, if you go through all of that, you may come to the conclusion, I can quite happily work in X country. I've done everything right. I've done my due diligence. I've adjusted my contract and my paperwork. And then by all means, there are many counsellors that do work across borders and have gone through the process of really ethically considering what that looks like. I think if there's one area of concern, it's the rise of online therapy platforms where a therapist might join that platform and then they are matched with a client who is not necessarily within their country. You might get a question saying, are you happy to work with clients in such a country? And there may be a consideration that these online platforms are doing the due diligence for you, but they are not. It is your practice. If a complaint comes in and is levied against you, or somebody wants to claim compensation, they're going to claim it against you, not against the platform, because it is you that is the practitioner at the end of the day. We cannot pass the buck as counselors and psychotherapists and hope that somebody else is doing the due diligence for us. We need to be doing that ourselves. So I think that's one area that stands out as a little bit of an area where due diligence is maybe not always followed.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Ken. It's very easy with these online platforms to think it's going to be okay. It speaks to the disinhibition effect, where you think it's going to be okay because we've got this online platform going. It's just a standard thing that everybody does. The marketing and the advertising says it's fine. It has to be all right. Fact of the matter is it might not be okay. And what I want to bring up as well is something that's I hardly ever heard spoke about in the online world. I did some research this morning, and there are 64 jurisdictions in the world where being gay is a criminal offence. And there is 12 jurisdictions in the world where it can be punished by death. And one of the things we need to consider is client safety. When we're working on the phone, we like to think that our connections are private and that no one's listening in. Fact of the matter is, a lot of the countries who prohibit same-sex relationships also run the phone system. And you can inadvertently put your client in harm's way. If they find themselves in a difficult position and they're talking, it only takes someone to listen in, and they could be in a very difficult position. Do the research, find out where those countries are. If you've got a client who's going over and may be in a category where that law may affect them, that is the subject of a conversation with them. Don't shy away from it. Say, you're residing in this country, you know the laws, and I think we just need to make it aware that if anybody found out, you could be in some difficulty. I think we just have to do that type of thing. We could get really wrapped up in the fact that in the UK, you don't really have to think about those things. But the world is sometimes not a good place for vulnerable clients.
Yeah, very much so. It's such an interesting area that you've shone the light into there, Rory. When we've been having this discussion, it might be assumed that when we're speaking about the client starts out in that other country and we're in the UK, let's take an example, but it can be a client that you are working with and have worked with for some time who is going on a trip or holiday and they say, can I still see you? Even more if they don't think to bring it up. But you connect with them for one of your sessions and you think, wow, hold on a minute. They look like the background is a little bit different to how they normally are. They could be in a different country and have not thought to tell us because I meet with my counsellor online, so it doesn't really matter. The onus still sits with us. If the client seems to be in a different location, we start the session by checking and asking them where they are. For that reason, it's so important